You're still watching TVC Breakfast. We'll now go to the Center of Unity where we link up with Eshamamo Imodu and Tijesu Adeoye in our Abuja studio for the FCT Brief. It's a beautiful Friday in Akwana, Abuja. Take it away.
Thank you, Ria. We are glad to be here again. It's another beautiful Friday morning here in the FCT, and we are already loaded with a lot to offer you this beautiful morning.
And it's, thank God it's Friday, and TJ, I think we should hit the ground running with what we have for our viewers.
Well, good morning, Nigerians, and you're welcome to FCT Brief, your window into national conversations shaping Nigeria's socio-political landscape. This morning, we'll be focusing on subjects that continue to dominate discourse around governance and inclusion. Over the years, women have continued to play critical roles in Nigeria's development, yet their representation in governance remains strikingly low. With less than 10% of elective and appointed positions occupied by women, the call for constitutional amendment to create reserved seats is growing louder among gender advocates, civil society groups, and policy reformers. Proponents of this move argue that gender quotas are not just about fairness, but about strengthening democracy through inclusivity, equity, and balanced representation. They believe that giving women a guaranteed space in governance would enhance national development and bring fresh perspectives to leadership and policy making.
However, critics caution that such a measure might undermine meritocracy and deepen political tokenism if not properly implemented. The debate, therefore, centers on whether constitutional reform is the right instrument to achieve gender parity or political will, and party reforms should take the lead. Joining us this morning to provide in-depth analysis and perspective on this crucial issue is a distinguished guest, Chief Mrs. Osasu Igbenedion Oguche, a renowned advocate for women's empowerment, media entrepreneur, and public affairs analyst. She will be sharing her insights on how best Nigeria can balance inclusion, competence, and representation in the ongoing constitutional review process. Stay with us as we delve into this thought-provoking conversation right away. Nice to have you join us this morning.
Thank you, Ash. Thank you, TJ. You both look beautiful. Thank
you, and you too.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's start this way. Nigeria is considering reserved seats for women, and some have argued that should such not be an issue of merits, end by merit instead of being a constitutional arrangement? And will you consider this process as a tokenism or an issue of empowering the women?
Thank you once again, and brilliant question. This is a question we keep on getting as we advance our campaign for the Reserved Seats for Women's Bill. Most times when the question comes up is because people are not privy to the intricacies of the bill. The Reserved Seats for Women's Bill is looking to add 74 additional seats in the National Assembly and 108 additional seats across the 36 states' assemblies for women to contest. It's not appointive, it's not tokenism, it's a contest amongst women. So what we are asking for is that in order to shore up the abysmal representation of women in Parliament, which is less than 5%, we are ranking at the very bottom in Africa, 54 out of 54. And we call ourselves the giants of Africa when it comes to women's representation in Parliament. So what this temporary special measure is looking to do is that for the next 4 election cycles, which is equivalent of 16 years, we're looking to have this temporary special measure, which is the Reserved Seats for Women's Bill, that would give women reserved seats to contest amongst one another. So APC will bring forth its candidate, PDP will bring forth its candidate, Labour Party, and the likes. It's a contest, is not tokenism. It's not going to be handed to women on a platter.
You said temporary.
Yes.
When it becomes a constitutional provision,
yes,
it's no longer a temporary, so
it's still
permanent.
Temporary. So we're looking to amend sections 48, 49, 71, 77, 91, and 117 of the Constitution, and enshrine in the Constitution when this bill becomes law, because it will become law. It's going to also state that it's for 16 years. After 16 years, this law would be up for review. How have we fared as a nation with having this temporary special measure in place for women to show up their participation in politics. So it's only going to last for 16 years. And we're hopeful because we've looked at Rwanda, we've looked at Senegal, we've looked at South Africa, we've looked at Kenya. After temporary special measures like this, we see more women who are now equipped, with the capacity in terms of financial capacity, reduction of negative social stereotypes for them to be able to go and vie successfully.
Well, I see that you recently launched an accountability tracker to monitor where lawmakers stand on the proposal for reserved seats for women. How exactly does this tool push forward the advocacy beyond talk and lead to, more legislative pressure?
That's a brilliant question, TJ. And this tracker gets me so excited because it's a tracker by young people and people who are really passionate about seeing this country move forward and progress. It's 469tracker.com, so everyone who's watching right now can literally just go on their phones and type in 469tracker.com, and you see where your parliamentarians stand on the reserved seats for women's bill. So we have 109 senators right now, and we have 360 members of the House of Representatives. If you add that together, we have 469 parliamentarians at the National Assembly who are the first point of contact to get this bill to scale through to the next level. So TOS Foundation thought about what's a way that we can find out beyond the rhetoric, beyond the promises. How can we ensure that we hold these parliamentarians accountable and make sure that their promises actually turns out to be their votes on the day, it's presented for third reading. So we launched this really cool tool called 469 Tracker, which tracks where your parliamentarian stands as of today on their support for the reserved seats for women's bill. So we used a traffic light system. Green is for they're supporting, red is that they're against, amber is we've not been able to reach them or they refuse to disclose, where they stand on the bill. So right now we have a lot of support. We set up a situation room at our National Secretariat for the Reserved Seats for Women's Bill campaign, and our young techies and advocates are calling all the parliamentarians. We have all their details and they're asking them their stance. We're meeting with them one-on-one. We are using AI to track their public statements about the bill, and that is the information that we're collating to feed into this tracker to ensure that we know where they stand before the voting. And this will keep on changing. So for example, if I conversed with a lawmaker yesterday and he or she told me she was in support of the bill, then 1 week later they changed their minds, that would also be fed into the tracker. So it's a live system. Every day it's being, updated, and you can see real-time, real information on where your parliamentarians stand. And it also helps you to hold them accountable, right? So if you're from Kebbi State, for instance, and you see it's red, you need to call your parliamentarians from Kebbi State to ensure that that flips to green and they're in support of the reserved seats for women's bill. Because remember, this is not a women's issue. It's a nation-building imperative. It's a democratic issue. We cannot claim to be practicing democracy and we're leaving 50% of our population behind. As you're both well aware, women make up 50% of Nigeria's population, but less than 5% representation in parliament. You cannot legislate for a group of people without having their voices on the table. A man does not have the lived experience of what it is to give birth, what it is to fight for better maternal and infant, health care. Nigeria has one of the highest rates of child malnutrition. Nigeria has one of the highest rates of maternal and infant deaths. You need women on the table to be able to lend their voices to these conversations when legislation is being crafted for women. So therefore, that's why this is very important.
And do you think this tool will give enough leverage to, push those votes, or is just sort of an expose kind of tool?
Oh, it is an incredible tool to actually ensure accountability. Because, a day, number one, is a long time in politics. And number two, when you're speaking with politicians, you also want to let them know that whatever you promise today, your constituents are expecting you to follow through with it. So don't just tell us the nice words that you will support us, So this tool is actually ensuring that that promise actually translates to votes on the day. So it's an accountability tool, not just an expose. And in fact, we don't even want an expose. What we are trying to do is to ensure that whatever you promise as a lawmaker, you're fulfilling that. So we're working in partnership with you. It's not civil society against parliamentarians. We're all working in harmony academy so we can scale this through to law. Because this time around, what we've done differently, we've partnered across board. I had a symposium about 2 weeks ago, and we had His Eminence, the Sultan of Sokoto, throw his weight behind this bill. We had the Vice President who was ably represented, the Senate President who was ably represented, the Deputy Speaker himself, Senator Mongono, the Chief Whip of the Senate. All these people came together and said, this bill is a reform whose time has come. Therefore, everyone must throw their weight if we are serious about national development. So we're all working together. The Nigeria Governors Forum has signed a partnership agreement with TOS Foundation, the Nigerian Governors Spouses Forum, the Office of the Deputy Speaker, who is the sponsor of the bill. The Speaker himself is a great he for she. He champions the bill everywhere he goes. The Senate President has thrown his weight behind it. So we're all together. So no one is fighting, each other. We're all speaking in one voice for the very first time. And we're saying, pass the reserved seats for women's bill. Let our women who have the appetite for politics, who have the capacity to deliver, come on the table. Let's legislate for the future of our nation and for our children at large.
Quite interesting. I'd like us to look at it this other way also. Reserve seats for women, and also any nation that takes for granted its women does that at their own peril. Exactly. And considering the population of the women folk, I should expect that when women decide that this is where we want to go, nothing should stop them, because they have the number, and politics is a game of numbers. Are we also considering the fact that beyond reserved seats, the advocacy that women should stand for the women when it comes to election? Because it's one thing to have a reserved seat and have the quality people and people who are ready to serve, so that it will not just be like what we have now. You have a lot of people in the National Assembly who are just there in number, but you don't see that representation. Their voices are not heard. So we don't have women come out because there's a reserved seat and they occupy space without giving quality representation. So what is your organization or women like you doing to also ensure that, look, the women folk are conscientized, that, look, it's not just about reserved seats. We want quality women to come out, and women that are ready not just to support the cause of women, but to support the cause of nation building?
That's a brilliant question, Ash, and that's one of the issues that have been keeping me up late at night, right? We don't just want to occupy seats or show up the numbers. We want people, as I said, with the capacity, with the brilliance, with the intelligence, with the appetite to legislate, and the empathy and the compassion, to bring their people on board, and better their lives when they get into the National Assembly. So I was actually with some honorable members yesterday having one-on-one advocacy regarding the bill, and this is what we were discussing. After this bill passes into law, what are some measures that we put in place to ensure that the people who actually come out, exactly, in the APC, in the PDP, in ABGA, in Labour Party, are actually people with competence and not just, handpicked by a godfather that says, exactly, okay, here, go into politics. So we're coming up with an academy called Her Academy, which will be launched in January of 2026, Q1. And this helps with training women who have the desire to run on these reserve seats, or even the traditional seats, with the capacity. We're going to bring in mentors who have been in the political space for quite some time, who have been exemplary in their leadership, to come in, train them for at least 6 weeks. We've developed also a mock curriculum of what this will look like, and it's a working document to ensure that those people who emerge victorious, as you said, are not just taking up number, but are coming actually to make a change. So this is something that we're working on, and I'm sure that we will have partners, who would help us get this academy, to the grassroots as well, and it won't just remain here in Abuja. So it's something that I believe we'll be able to implement, and this would ensure that the people who come out are people who will make us proud for all the hard work that we've done and all the effort that we've put in to campaigning for this reserve seats to become law.
All right, Chief. I'm sure that as a woman myself and other young female Nigerians are curious to know how this would work, especially in the favor of the women. But now, who ultimately decides which women get these seats? Would you say the voters, or what we have now, which is the political godfathers? And could this policy in practice, end up reinforcing the same power structures that marginalize women in the first place?
Thank you, Ash. So as I said earlier, this is a voting system. It's not appointive. So there will be party primaries in each of the political parties for the reserved seats for Women's Bill. Each candidate that emerges victorious will then go to the general elections with other candidates that were victorious from the other different political parties. Then they compete amongst one another. So let me give you a better example. In Abia State, for instance, you have a woman who wants to be a member of the House of Representatives. So the APC will hold party primaries for that reserved seat. The PDP will hold party primaries for that reserved seat, and the other political parties. So anybody that emerges victorious in the party primary, so that becomes the candidate. Then you have all these women candidates come out in the general election, then compete, amongst one another. And whoever emerges victorious, either the APC or the PDP or the APGA or the Labour Party, is then the person who would represent the entire state as the representative in the House for the reserved seats for Women's Bill. So it's a competition. No one person can decide this is my candidate, therefore this is the person that's going. That's the beauty of this. It's not appointive, it's selective. It's about merit, it's about capacity, it's also about politics. Because what I tell the women who are interested in running for these seats is that politics is local. So make sure that as you are talking about this, as you're anticipating to run on these seats, you go home and build your structures. You talk to your constituents, you sell what you're trying to deliver to them, you ensure that you are doing projects already in your constituency. So when it's time, they vote for you, because they would have the ultimate say as the electorate to put you into office. So we don't have a godfather who is deciding, who would win the election. It's a competition, and therefore everyone has to come out ready for that.
Okay, let me a bit try to disagree with you in that, with this question. It might end up like a normal political game where the godfathers determine whichever political party, because somebody is going to emerge, they're going to go through primaries. And most times we know, even in a normal election, it is who the godfather puts down at the end of the day that takes the day, that wins the stuff. And at the point we had this advocacy when they said not too young to rule, it didn't become a constitutional issue. The youth were determined at that time that, look, it's either you look our way or we will move with our votes against you. And the entire nation realized that it was a time for the youth to emerge. Why are we not leaning on that advocacy? That, look, the women have the number. It's time for the women to have a voice for each political party to increase the number of women representation, rather than go the way of constitutional arrangement. I'm saying it so that you convince those who still believe that constitutional arrangement should not be. The advocacy should be that strong that, look, it's the time for the women's voice to be heard. And whichever political party that is not given adequate number, the women folk can decide to move against that party. Can't we adopt that measure we use in not too young to rule?
So you've asked a two-pronged question. I'll take the second one first. What we're doing for the reserved seats for women's vote exactly replicates the not too young to run bill when it became law. It's a constitution amendment as well. We had to amend the constitution. We had to go through the entire constitutional amendment process in order for it to become law, because sections of our constitution had to be changed to reduce the age of people who wanted to run for the state houses of assembly and the House of Representatives from 30 down to 25. The Senate the proposal was for the Senate to drop down to 30, but the senators kept it at 35, same with the gubernatorial and president for 40. So it's the same thing. It's a constitutional amendment process. The way this works is that it goes through the first reading, which is the title reading. It goes through second reading, where members, senators debate it on the floor of the National Assembly. Then it goes to committee stage, which is currently in. You saw the national public hearings across the different geopolitical zones. Foundations like TOS appointed geopolitical leads, who then appointed state leads, who then appointed local government leads, who then appointed ward leads. That is why you see the momentum that you see today. In every corner of Nigeria, that you are hearing about the demand for the reserve seats for women's bill. Members of parliament actually call us and tell us their constituents are calling them to reiterate the importance of this bill to them. So it's no longer a campaign, it's a movement. And parliamentarians are aware that in order to effectively represent their constituency, they need to toe the lines of supporting the reserve seats for women's bill. And at this committee stage now, there's actually a retreat going on in Lagos where the Senate and the House of Representatives Constitution Review Committee are coming together to harmonize all the constitutional amendment bills with the reserve seats for women's bill, which is one of them, to ensure that the feedback that they got from the zonal public hearings are actually reflected when they present it to the floor of Parliament in the next coming days or weeks. So therefore, it's a constitution reform, it's a bill whose time has come, and it is very clear that the Nigerian people are demanding this. It's not just an elitist movement, it's a movement for all of Nigeria. And your first question that you asked about godfatherism, we know the political terrain in Nigeria. We've seen a lot of big men and women with money, with, caliber, come out and back a candidate, and that candidate still failed. So it would go through the proper election process. If you have a godfather in APC that's backing a woman, a godfather in PDP that's backing a woman, let them all go out and fight, right? The person with the capacity we're hoping for, the most capacity and competence, was the person who will emerge victorious. But we must keep on sensitizing the general public, because when it comes time to voting, they wield the power. The power belongs to the people to elect leaders that would reflect your yearnings and your desire as a citizen of Nigeria. The country cannot move forward without good leadership. That is why we're so passionately advocating for this bill. As I said earlier, it's not just about having more women in number. It's about having brilliant minds, more creative ideas, people with lived experiences to legislate for the greater population of Nigeria.
Well, Chief, I like the passion with which you speak about this very important topic, but you agree with me that reserve seats alone won't fix this systemic exclusion. What complementary reforms, sort of like campaign financing, party structure changes, or election security, must be in place for this policy to actually succeed? And then again, do you think that the political class has the will to push those deeper reforms and see it to the finish line, and it's not just about optics?
TJ, that's a very brilliant question. I'm also excited about some bills that are currently also being considered in the constitution amendment process, such as state policing, some electoral reforms that sees that all voting takes place on the same day, rather than having fragmented voting, which also exposes you to more corruption and flawed electoral processes. I believe that if we're able to scale all this through simultaneously, 2027 will be different. We would see more leaders that are reflective of the yearnings of Nigerians. So, as you said, there have to be complementary reforms that would really uptake the impact of this bill when it becomes law. A lot of things have to work hand in hand. For example, security during elections is a very big deal. It's something that we need to shine more light on, right? As a woman, you must feel comfortable being able to say, I'm voting and I'm staying all through to secure my vote. By the time the sun goes down, you're looking around and worried about your security, right? So if we have, laws in place that ensures that you go out to exercise your civic responsibility as a patriotic citizen, that you are protected, that your vote is protected, that you're not scared, you're not intimidated, you're not afraid to exercise your freedom and your rights. So I completely agree with you, and more light needs to be shined on all these other bills that are being considered this time around during the constitution amendment process, such as state policing and other electoral reform bills that are up for discussion.
Okay. Beyond the reserve seat, we're still in the month of the International Day of the Girl Child.
Yes, we are.
And what would you say to the girl child about her worth, her rights, and her power to determine who rules her?
Thank you for that brilliant question. For the girls watching who are not in school, my son is on half term, so maybe some of you are at home. I want to implore you to use your voice. Never be shy to speak up for your rights. Never be shy to aspire to be anything that you can dream of and fathom. I had a young woman, and this is one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this. I had a young girl ask me, Auntie Osasu, I want to be a senator one day, but I don't know if my dreams are valid because I don't see a lot of women in the Senate. I don't see a lot of women in Parliament. And my response to her is, when this reserved seats for women become law, you will see more women and your dreams are valid. It's possible for you. And I want that to really be our reality in Nigeria. I want young girls to not be constrained by the reality we see today with the limitation of women who are in power. I want them to know that as long as they pursue their education, as long as they work hard, as long as they, put in, everything that they need to ensure that, they're successful, then they can become successful. We shouldn't have negative social norms, barricading them from achieving their goals and dreams. Imagine people saying to Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala when she was a young girl, you cannot be, a CEO, or you cannot be a leader because you are a woman. Imagine keeping her at home and refusing to educate her, but educating her brother, her cousins, because, they're male. So we need to be able to show these young girls that there is a lot of possibility in the agenda. And this is why we're so passionate about this. So my message to them is that your dreams are valid, that people like me, people like all, our partners at TOS Foundation and other civil society organizations are fighting to bring about an equitable society where your voices will be heard, where your hard work will be the main determinant of your success. As long as you put in that hard work, as long as you're resilient, as long as you're stubborn about your dreams and your goals, and you will be able to achieve it. That's the society I envision. Those are the dreams I have for young girls, and we're working towards that. I want to be able to bequeath a better Nigeria to these young girls and to my daughter, who is 9 months today, by the way. So I want a situation where she can dream to become president, and that dream would actually be valid, and it would be a possibility in this country. So this is my message to them. Keep working hard, keep putting out your best foot forward, and, everything will be made possible for you.
And how would you say that the girl child can rise above all this cultural and religious limitation, especially pushing forward the sensitization and the advocacy for equality among us as a country? You see, where a random man does not really respect the rights of the women. That is the world we live in now. So how would you say that this advocacy can be pushed forward to better accept the woman as equal and not just, under the man?
I think I would give you my own personal lived experience. It's about being stubborn. So some people call it stubborn, some people call it assertive, but I don't mind either of this phrasing. Once you have a goal in mind, once you have a vision for yourself, pursue it at all cost. Reject the, reprimand of the naysayers, reject all the negative things that they have to say about you. Be laser focused about your goals, right? You are here for a purpose. If you believe in a higher power, you should know that you have a destiny before you were even formed in your mother's womb, so therefore focus on that. Realize the purpose that God has created for your life and pursue it at all costs. If people tell you talk too much for a woman or you're too aggressive, tell them that I am my own woman. Tell them that, you are created differently. You're not meant to be like everybody else. So it's very important that as a woman, you are laser focused on your goal. Do not take no for an answer. Be stubborn about the goals that you set for yourself. Also, outread, outwalk all your counterparts, because you need to always put your best foot forward at all times.
Well, Chief Osasu Igbenedion, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, TJ. Thank you, Ash. It's always a pleasure being here.
Thank you.